Hey everyone, this is Linda Bennett, your spiritual counselor and psychic host with Metaphysically Speaking. Welcome, all new viewers, and those of you who have been with us for some time, and those of you who have been with me for years and years. Today is the Christmas show, and I'm not going to cover a lot of the stuff that you can already see on the History and History International and the Learning Channel about the berries and the logs. I mean, there are two types of Christmas that we celebrate every year. You're going to say two? No, we're celebrating the birth of Jesus. Well, no, that's only half of it. We're celebrating the Northern European traditions of the feast of the winter solstice. And that is usually on December 21st. And that is the longest night and the shortest day. The summer solstice is on or about June 21st, and that is the longest day and the shortest night. So the ancients knew that it was a wise thing to do to keep track of the year and to keep track of where they were in the year and how their community was going and how they were going personally. And regardless of whether you were in Ireland, Wales, France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, any of the Scandinavian countries, any of the northern Italian areas, Germany, Austria, you were going to be celebrating the solstice. The Czechs as well, although it wasn't called Czechoslovakia in the old days. It was a way of honoring the fact that they came through with a harvest. Hopefully it was good enough to sustain them throughout the year, as well as keeping track of where they were. And honoring the God force that were bringing them, the God forces that were bringing them all the things that they needed to have, whether it was their food, whether it was good water supply. If you're reading the papers, Egypt's in trouble because a lot of other countries are now laying claim to the Nile. And just like out west years ago, I said there were going to be fights over the Colorado River. There are water fights out west in the United States. I understand that through Facebook and tweeting and all the other stuff that's available electronically today. We are heard all over the world. So the Colorado River feeds Colorado, I believe, Utah, California. And so everybody is now arguing over who should get what water. It's considered that the Californians are taking too much of a share as opposed to what the other states are getting. This has been going on for years, since the late 70s. And especially now with the fact that basically everybody, including the naysayers, have agreed, yeah, we do have a climate problem. There is less water because there's less snow, and so therefore less water for people to use. And the farmers of California are using way too much. And I think as a general rule, the farmers of large crops are wasting too much water, and they have to figure out a better way to do it. Well, water wars, food shortages, all of this takes place periodically, only this seems to be the worst we've had in a very, very long time. So the people in the ancient days were thanking the God forces, whether you say Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, it doesn't matter. It's all the same energy, and they were thanking the God forces for getting them through to this point in the year with a good harvest, with enough water, with enough clothes, with enough shelter, to be able to sustain the rest of the winter. In the summer, they say thank you for the good crops that we've been putting in, and may everything work out brilliantly. Also, the summertime or the springtime, depending upon the different culture, was a time when a lot of men and women selected each other as spouses. Or in the ancient Celtic tradition, it would be Beltane, and that was the May 1st celebration. And you selected someone you thought you wanted to marry, and you had the opportunity to live with them for a year. The following Beltane, you would either proclaim yes or no, or perhaps you broke up sooner, or perhaps you realized this was the person you wanted to spend your life with. So the ancients celebrated these days because they were opportunities to remember who they are, where they came from, and what they wanted to do. The Yule log came from the northern countries that had pine trees, whether it's Germany or northern France, England, of course, anywhere around that area. And holly berries come from, obviously, the holly tree or the holly bush. And the berries were the female energy of God, the fruitation, the bringing forth, the idea of the leaf, which was the male aspect of God. So that's why there was always a sprig of holly at every table. And these different celebrations have different important meanings. They never did anything for nothing. They never did anything silly that didn't have any meaning. You didn't have time to do things that were silly without meaning. You were busy trying to survive. There was no air conditioning. There was no electric heat. There was no electricity. Yes, we have discovered that the ancients were not as dumb as everybody thought they were. They were not dragging their knuckles along the highway. They were quite bright people who had great setbacks and were able to survive and thrive and finally arrive at this point, which I'm not so sure is in advance when we're burning up the planet, but nevertheless, we've covered that before. We will not beat it to death on this program. The next show we do is going to be about December 21st, 2012, and I will be explaining things to you, so I want you to relax. I've heard two things about that. One, people aren't sure if they fly somewhere that they'll be able to get back home in time for the holidays. And two, that people are renting cars so they can leave their cars home because they're not sure they're going to have transportation. So I want you to all calm down. We'll discuss that next time. So now, why is Christmas celebrated on the 25th? Well, because everybody was already celebrating on the 21st, and the Christians thought, well, the Catholics at that point thought, well, let's just try to squeeze this in, but change the date from that awful pagan holiday of December 21st. We'll make it the 25th. And so many countries for years and years and years celebrated Christmas on the 21st anyway. They didn't really give a bunny rabbit's backside what Rome was doing, and they wanted to continue their celebration. Over time, it has moved to the 25th, the celebration of the birth of Jesus, which did not happen December 25th or the 21st, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So there is a cultural celebration. It is rumored, started by the Catholic Church, that St. Nicholas is the one who gave out presents first, but it was an acculturation, and it wasn't toys. It was an orange, it was an apple, it was a basket of nuts, it was maybe onions, which were hard to grow in certain climates, were considered a delicacy, but an important delicacy for the diet. So children and parents would give each other things that they could utilize, that were going to save their lives, that were going to actually make a difference in how they could survive. St. Nicholas was rumored to have stuck some money in a little rock outside of a person's house who was very poor, and that person found the money the next day and was able to feed the family. So he thought it was a really good idea, and he continued to do that with parish funds. So that is the spirit of giving, and that has been incorporated into the celebration of Jesus' life and Jesus' birth. Nobody can give you an exact date. I will repeat this. Nobody can give you an exact date of the birth of Jesus. Do you know why? Because nobody cared. It didn't matter. He didn't come to have his birthday celebrated. He came to make drastic changes in the Jewish religion. He didn't come to be on TV. He didn't want to be a televangelistic individual. He didn't want to be writing books. He just wanted to pass along this important message that the female aspect of God and the planet was just as important as the male. I'm going to repeat that because I know some of you have just fallen off your chairs in shock. Yes, indeedy, there is a female aspect of God. There is a duality in the universe, not good and evil. And by the way, evil is not the opposite of good. If your child is misbehaving, do you say the kid's evil? No, the kid's being bad. The kid's being naughty. The child's being great, you say the kid's being good. There is a difference between bad and evil. Evil is a whole separate entity. That is why I dislike religion so much, because so often they have lied and lied and lied, and then they try to get out of it and try to wiggle out of it. Suddenly the Catholic Church is acknowledging there might be life on other planets. We should continue pursuing the exploration of space, and they can never compensate for the lie that they have told, and started by the Jewish religion, because remember, Jesus was Jewish. His mother was Jewish. His father, he came from on both sides the house of David. So naturally, he would be considered the Messiah, which means the anointed one, just as Christos, Jesus' last name, was not Christ. People didn't go by, Harry Brown in those days. They went by Joseph of Nazareth, or Jean of Bethlehem, or Susie of Cairo, which wasn't called Cairo at the time. But nevertheless, they weren't billions of people on the planet at that time. So if you were Susie Carpenter, you would be known as Susie the Carpenter, and everybody knew where you were from. So therefore, the two celebrations that we're dealing with at Christmas time, at the winter solstice, are cultural, where we got the Yule log, the holly berries, the gifting of food, usually, or maybe a comb for a girl. I guess boys didn't worry about their hair in those days. No hair gel, kids. And getting together and celebrating a meal. The people who had trees, which became known as Christmas trees, brought them in. They brought in a special log with a wonderful fragrance for a celebration. It wasn't the only time they brought a Yule log in, but it was especially emphasized on that day. Remember, people lived in enclosed houses. Cooking smells, non-bathing smells. Northerners, even though they had tons of water, were not really big on bathing. Can you imagine? I cannot. I have a very delicate sense of smell, and that would not have worked for me. So therefore, they did whatever they could to brighten the environment in the home and to brighten the environment in their lives. Maybe a mother was given a piece of cloth so she could make a dress for herself or clothes for the children. And she gave the father maybe a tool that was fashioned by the local tool maker, which would make his life easier in doing repairs around the house. So nothing was frivolous, everything had importance. And the second celebration is the birth of Jesus and his message, which is so often lost today. We almost never hear the message of Jesus, which was that the female is equal to the male, and love each other as you love God, which is a variation on treat others as you'd like to be treated yourself. And it's also very Buddhist. Buddhist, you claim? Why, how can that be? Well, they lived in the area of the Silk Road, which I'm sure you've heard. And the Silk Road was a great traveling route, right up to the Himalayas. Everybody knew about it. It's why Jerusalem was so busy, why they had to have translators, why they had to have money changers, because you needed to have the coin of the realm wherever you were going to be. And it wasn't just, from the town over. It was from all parts of the world. So people were traveling, and Jesus traveled as well. By the way, his name was not Jesus. That's the Americanization or Anglification of it. It was Yeshua. So Yeshua of Jerusalem, or Yeshua of Nazareth, is written in ancient texts in Lhasa, and I believe Nepal as well. So in his travels, and in his wanting to stay away from the area before he caused too much trouble at the inappropriate time instead of the appropriate time, he traveled. And of course he knew about Buddha. So much of his teachings had spread throughout the Middle East. There are Buddhists in Egypt, believe it or not. There's not a lot of them. The Muslims don't want them there anymore. And I'm not talking about the peaceful Muslims. I'm talking about the people running things who have taken over the politics and trying to take over the military throughout the Middle East. Tragically, just as the Christians saw their right to take over the world, and that's why the Crusades were fought. The first level of Crusades were to go get the goodies out of the Middle East and bring them back to Rome. The second part was more, let's conquer those miserable Muslims, and we're going to take over. Well, that didn't work very well, because Saladin, the Islamic military leader, basically said, you boys with the horses and the desert, are you kidding me? They're dropping over. You're dropping over. Look at all the stuff you're wearing. Are you crazy? You got a sword? You can't even lift it. You're telling me you're going to try to take over my community, my country, my religion? Go home. So after a brief discussion and seeing their horses buried up to their knees in sand, because horses were not meant for the desert, camels were meant for the desert, people, the Crusaders turned around and hightailed it back home. And that was the end of that. We do not control the Middle East. We who think we are Christians, or we who think we are Jewish, or anything else. Guess what? Nobody controls the Middle East. You know who controls the Middle East? God. The Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, controls the planet. Humans have had the arrogance to think that they are running things. The guardian angels and the archangels allow humans to go so far, and then they slap them down. The planet allows us to go so far, and then we have major earthquakes and volcanoes. Some land goes up, some land goes down, and civilization has to start again because you made a mess out of it before. And we're going to be covering... Oh, we got a little couple. I can keep going. My executive producer says I can keep talking for another minute and a half. When people decide they're going to do blood rites, and I'm sorry if I'm annoying people who do voodoo and Santeria, you never draw blood. And the concept of the body and blood of Christ. First of all, no one knows what Jesus really said. There were no video cams. There were no cell phones taking movies of somebody's dinner. There was nothing. All we know is what the Catholic Church has chosen, directed by Constantine, to pass down. Remember, there were over 400 versions of the Gospels. 400? There's only 4 in the Bible. Well, guess what? We don't even know the names of the people who wrote that information down. That's right, we don't. There were names assigned to people. We got no clue. We have no clue as to what is true and what is not true. What you can do when you're reading the Bible or the Quran is try to pull the very best out of it. Not the very violent, but the very best. What seems to be the truest and the kindest and the wisest. That's how you read the Bible. And we're going to pick that up when we come back with more Metaphysically Speaking. I'm Linda Bennett. And this is Linda Bennett, back with Metaphysically Speaking. You can catch us on Facebook. You can catch us on WTMY in the Sarasota area. And you can find us on Twitter. If you want to listen to some of the old shows and see some of my television shows, just click on and you will find all the little goodies that you're looking for.
Metaspeak.com.
And Metaspeak.com. Of course, that is my executive producer, Shawnee. And I've been doing this a very long time. I've been doing a lot of research my whole life. And if you want to look at my file cabinet, which I dread doing, you'll find information there for the last 30 years. So you will discover, as well as studying different religions, that I have informed myself. I don't like talking about anything I don't know anything about. And so therefore, you can pretty much pay attention to what I'm saying here. Interestingly, I used to have several Catholic priests that I've counseled. A Greek Orthodox priest, and 2 rabbis. Actually, one minister, I forgot about him. He was a really nice guy. He was thinking of changing denominations, and so that was the gist of, and then he wanted to know how I knew all this, and he had actually gone to a Catholic college, and he learned a lot about what I'm saying at the Catholic college, but sadly, they don't dispense this information out to their people in their churches. And that's why there's such a skewed perspective of women on this planet today, because the 3 major religions, and I'm not counting Hinduism and Buddhism because they understand the balance of the female energy of God, but the Western religions, I'll refer to them as the Western religions, have a total disregard for women and a disrespect. And every time you hear about there was just a thing on the news today about some mother throwing her son's 16th birthday party with strippers. I think the woman needs prison for about 6 months and psychiatric care. I think that there's an appropriate situation and not. And I don't even like that concept to begin with. If you're getting married, you don't have strippers the night before. Anybody who ever did that to me would find himself on the other side of the door. So this is sort of, justified by the Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, disregarding women. And if one more Jewish person says, well, women control the home, that is such a joke. If the man doesn't provide it, the woman controls nothing. She's not even allowed to use birth control if she's Orthodox. Even the Catholics have caught up to that one, and women are controlling their uteruses, which is one of the many, many reasons Romney lost the election. And we're not going back to the Dark Ages or even the early 1920s and 30s. Birth control was extraordinarily difficult, and it was always the woman's responsibility because we're the ones who get pregnant. And ladies, I'm deviating for a second. Here's a little secret. If you've got the uterus, you are ultimately responsible. So I don't care what he says, make sure that you are using contraception if you don't want to be pregnant. Maybe fair, maybe unfair, but it's a physical reality. We get pregnant. So my suggestion is take care of it. Okay, so the justification with strippers and marginalizing women's intelligence and basically talking to the man as opposed to the woman. If you ever go to a car dealership, you might experience that situation. Did you just have that situation? They might have taken a look at you and said, we're not going to mess with you. But it has happened before. It happened with my ex-husband and myself years ago, where I had to wave at the guy and I pulled myself over so I was in his line of sight. I said, I'm here too. Yeah, but you're not going to be driving the car. Yes, actually, I will be driving the car. And this is not in the 1800s, people. So this is okayed. This is implicitly okay by the disrespect of women, the marginalizing of women. And this has been going on for thousands of years. It's a very Middle Eastern way. It was, in many African nations, a very African way. And if I don't find the name of that tribe in Africa, that is a matrilineal lineage, that is always run by a woman. There is no chief, there's a chiefess. And in their language, there is no word for war. They don't have a word. People aren't running around killing each other. They're not attacking other tribes. Other tribes don't bother with them. They're not perceived as having anything worthwhile. And they're a very happy tribe. They have fewer incidents of illness. They have they have longer age lifespan than most of the other tribes do. And it's not a bad place to live. But isn't it interesting that it's a matrilineal tribe, meaning not patrilineal, it is matriarchal, female. And women want peace. Most women. There are exceptions. Some of it's biological, where a woman could have too much testosterone and she might be too aggressive and angry and violent. And therefore, she obviously needs a chemical balance. Usually can be achieved by diet or natural processes, but should be evaluated by a doctor. But women are the birth givers to the planet. Women are the emotional level of the family, where men are the logical level of the family. And because women couldn't control their uteruses and would get pregnant regularly, they couldn't exactly be out running and ruling the tribe, unless they were the Amazons. And you remember years ago, they discovered Amazons in actually South America, and they've also discovered an Amazon-like tribe up in the Viking area. So they're still studying the bones, but the women were quite tall. They were over 6 feet. And the only male bones they found were sort of in an off area in the village. And they used them for breeding and for doing heavy work. And the women ran things, and they did the hunting, and they gave birth, and off they went. And the men were in charge. Some of the men were in charge of taking care of the children during the day and protecting the tribal area. And I'm not saying we should go back to the Amazonian times, but we should do what Jesus came to the planet to do. And that is treat women as humans, as equals, as souls. Because guess what? That's what they are. We're all souls. Sometimes you're in a male costume. Sometimes you're in a female costume. It doesn't matter because every so many lifetimes you flip over. Maybe you've been a male 5 or 6 or 10 lifetimes. Now you need to learn your lessons through the female aspect, and then you flip over to being a male. Yes, there's reincarnation. Even the Catholic Church used to teach it. I'll just cut you off right there. Yes. Anybody who thinks this is one time is really someone who does not want to deal with their own behavior. They want to think that they just disappear and they don't have to be accountable for their behavior in this lifetime. Sorry, are you in for a surprise? So Jesus came from a lineage of people from the house of David, which in the Jewish religion was considered urgent, important, and the bottom line for whether or not you were going to be the spiritual leader of your people. And John the Baptist was his cousin. And if you look at the so-called baptismal Easter celebration and the Jesus's birth, there is an important correlation. Because with these Christmas hymns that we sing, Christ was born in Bethlehem. Christ was never born. It's a Greek term meaning Christos, meaning appointed one. Jesus was born, in my research and the research of many others, with the original soul of Zoroaster, who, along with Buddha, forecasted and prophesied the arrival of Jesus, which would change the thoughts in the Middle East. And so it is thought that Zoroaster was in the body of Jesus when he was born. And the 3 wise men, there could have been 10, they've just narrowed it down to make it simple. Because remember, people listening to these stories did not have Harvard educations. They didn't even go to community college because they didn't go to school. They didn't know how to read. Only very wealthy people were taught how to read, and very rarely was it wealthy women. They had to be exceptionally bright with enlightened parents to learn how to read, to learn how to count. So think of all the opportunities missed in the development of our cultures because women's voices were not heard. So he came to the planet in the body of Yeshua with Zoroaster's soul, because the wise men were astrologers. And Zoroaster, who was a fire aspect of the divine, was about 650 years to 500 years. There's a big humdum about the timing of everything right now. If you get Atlantis Rising, which is a magazine I like and I dislike for one reason. If you know who the author is and it's a legitimate author, it's a legitimate article. They also print articles from unknown people who have these bizarre theses that you think, what am I reading? What is this? What magazine am I looking at here? And they tell you in the beginning that they don't vet everything, that these people have submitted articles and they're for you to evaluate. So some evaluation is desperately needed, even in your daily paper. So he came through as the former master or prophet Zoroaster, and finding him again, like they look for the Dalai Lama again when one crosses over, and they're guided as to where to look, and the test is whether a child recognizes things from their past and what they did with them, and you can't do that just out of a hat. You have to be that person coming back. And in their culture, they come back rather soon because they want to continue serving. The Dalai Lama said that he would be the last Dalai Lama, interestingly. I think the fact that Buddhism is not really a religion, but a philosophy of life, requires that people take independent responsibility. And the Dalai Lama has done a great job in providing information, has written many wonderful books. And Buddhism is a concept of kindness to all living beings, whether it's a tree, a pussycat, or a person, and respect and attempting to achieve a level of oneness with the universe and inner peace. Not such a bad deal. So I think that he feels that there isn't a need for another Dalai Lama, and we'll find out in the future. So Jesus came through as Zoroaster. His followers found him, even though it was 600 to 500 years later. They knew the forecasting of the general location, and they also, as astrologers, did what we call astrocartography, and they did a location map, and that's how they knew where to look. And years ago, I had this astrological, which I still have in my file somewhere, but it's stupid to be talking about it over the radio and trying to show it because I can't. It's a 5-pointed star, head up, arms out, legs at the bottom, which is how a 5-pointed star should be used. Don't let anybody tell you that the pentacle of the pentagram of the 5-pointed star is bad. It should always be used head up like a person. The 5 physical senses with the soul in the center overcoming the limitations of the 5 physical senses. So that chart existed for that day. And they knew exactly when to set out. They've been this route before. They were travelers on the Silk Road. They visited many cultures and they found Jesus. They acknowledged him. They gave him frankincense, myrrh, and gold, which were symbols of the things he would need. And one was an anesthetic, the other was a preservative, and the other was money to be used. And off they went. And they knew about the prophecy of Herod looking for this child that he didn't want, countering any of his power. And so they wanted to get out of town quick. They did their work, they acknowledged him, they made their records, and off they went. So until the baptism in the water, it came to me many years ago, I said, why was this dunking so important? Why did each person who told a story about it have a different but similar variation of light over his head, ascending up to the heavens, descending down from the heavens? Why was it a white dove, which was, by the way, the female aspect of God in the Middle East and Northern Europe? In the Polish, German, Southern Russian area, she was called Sophia, which was my grandmother's name. And so the idea of a dove or a light coming down from the heavens into Jesus was the transfer of souls. Zoroaster had done his job. Now the Jesus soul had to come into play to finish the mission. And you say, well, why couldn't the Jesus soul be born into Mary? Because it was such a highly evolved soul, even though Mary, as the Catholic Church will tell you, was born without original sin. And I used to question the priest till they wanted to strangle me. What's original sin? If Mary didn't live before, how could she have original sin? Original sin has to be your karma. God, especially the Irish with the red hair and the pale skin would turn crimson. The Irish priests were not happy with me, and I wasn't happy with them. So it was even. So even though Mary was a highly evolved being who, one, either never had to inhabit a physical body before, because she was a pure aspect of God sent down here, probably needed Excedrin, for the mission she was on, or she was a soul, had already finished her reincarnation, was back united with the God force again, and came down for the special mission. Even though she was who she was, and is who she is, she had a physical body, and that physical body couldn't tolerate a birthing of such an important being as herself. So it had to come in when Jesus' body was mature enough and ready for his mission. So I believe the submerging underwater, whether you believe it was half or whole, what I was given in meditation was the exchange of one soul leaving the body and the brighter, more powerful soul coming in was hot. And being under the water really helped the physical body. You can't forget that we are in a physical body on a mission. So he was born with the soul of Zoroaster, who left at the time Jesus was baptized, and the soul of the Jesus form of God came down. We're all forms of God. We're all sparks of God. But remember, they were talking to ignorant people who were used to thinking in a certain way. So to get attention, they jazzed things up. Just like an author or a news reporter wants to jazz things up. So they get more acclaim, a better reputation, and it's a bigger story, and you'll all listen to the news. We're going to come back with the rest of the story right after this break. It's Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking. Welcome back, everybody. It's Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking, and we're coming to you over WTMY in Sarasota. We're also coming to you on Facebook and Twitter. And when you find my Facebook, you can punch up old television shows, you can punch up the radio shows, archives of the radio shows, and also my recommended reading list. I got a call from somebody in California who wanted to know how he could learn more about metaphysics. Well, checking my old records there with TV shows and the radio shows is a good way. And there is a recommended reading list for beginners, intermediate, and advanced. Also, I recommend some television shows. I like Fringe, but I think it's a little wacky this year. People are loving it. I'm not loving it. I hope it ends really well. Babylon 5 is still one of my favorite sci-fi programs. Star Trek. All of these programs talk about the future and how we behave, but some human foibles, whether they're humans from this planet or humans from other planets, are the same. So check into these programs, these books, these authors. Any of the people you see on the Learning Channel or the History Channel or History International 2, Robert Schoch, I think it's Robert Schoch, Robert Bauval. I have a whole list of people.
It's all there on Metaspeak.com.
All there. Tsoutsakis is this guy's last name. He's got the Londo hair. If you watch Babylon 5, and the guy who was the ambassador with the hair brushed up in the air like Don King, well, that's what this guy looks like. Somebody needs to give him a comb. They did one show with him and his hair was combed back, and I thought, I think it looks better bushed up. I think this guy should keep his old style. The idea that has just come to light, by the way, which is a requirement of a rabbi, that he marry before the age of 33. In some factions, it's 30. Is very true. It would not have been less true of Jesus than any other rabbi or anybody else who came before him. And so the idea and the proof now that they're finding, which was been in the Gnostic Gospels for a couple of thousand years, is that there was Mary Magdalene, and she was his wife, and there were children. And I have just posted on my website, my executive producer actually did it today with an assistant of hers, a Hail Marys, Mary Mother, Mary Magdalene. Is it coincidental that they're both called Mary? We'll cover that in a minute. A prayer that I rewrote that I got in meditation. And it's acknowledging the two Marys, as well as Jesus' birth, as well as his brothers and sisters, as well as his children with Magdalene. So I think you'll enjoy it. If you don't like it, don't look at it. You do like it, then feel free to write it down for yourselves or make a copy off your printer. I guess people can do that. And make it part of your daily prayers and meditations. That's right, I'll repeat that again. Make it part of your daily prayers and meditations. Even if you just get up in the morning and say, thank you, God, for every good blessing that I've had yesterday and throughout my life and the good blessings I expect tomorrow. If you're hearing this in the Northeast and you're one of those people who have no home, no neighborhood, no electricity, obviously, my heart and prayers go out to you. We can cover that in the next show. But you're saying, what the hell am I grateful for? Well, you're still here, and that means you still have work to do. You still have your mission to fulfill. So make sure every day for the rest of your life you do something important and kind. So you're saying, what do I have to be grateful for? You are grateful for the extended opportunity to finish your homework for this lifetime. So there's less to do in the next lifetime. So if you say, Linda, there's nothing we have to be grateful for, believe me, I have been without power in storms. I can't breathe in the heat. I fully understand part of what you're going through. Fortunately, I haven't lost my house, but I will tell you, if that storm hit Florida, there'd be no Florida. There'd be no coast of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, as far as the mountains go. So we would be missing probably a quarter of the United States right now. You have land you can build on. I hope they do it wisely, and I hope you're not dumb enough to go back on the shore and build a house, because it's going to continue to erode. Beaches I swam at as a child are gone years ago with another hurricane. So the earth changes its shores regularly. Please use your heads. I don't care that you want to go back to the street. Go where you're going to be safer. So the Hail Mary's prayer that I wrote is up there for you to take and use yourselves, for you to discuss with your friends. Years ago when I taught that class, you were at that class, weren't you? Where Brett's mother was there, and where we talked about how the Catholic Church claims and the Jewish religion claims that God has no beginning, God has no end, God just is. And I said, well, then God can't have a mother or a father. And everybody said, absolutely. I think there were about 70 people there that night. And I said, okay, let's say the Hail Marys. Hail Mary, full of grace, God is with you. What is it? Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with you. Blessed are you amongst women, blessed the fruit of your Jesus, Holy Mary. Mother of, and everybody stopped dead. It was a moment I wish I had on tape. Mother of God is how the Catholics say it. Well, that implies either that the God force in the entire universe, Mary's the mother of that, or that Jesus was God. Jesus was not God any more than the bubble is the ocean. The bubble is the part of the ocean, just like we're part of the ocean. But we're not the ocean. Jesus was not God. Jesus was a part of God with an important mission, just as Mary, mother, her husband that everybody forgets, poor Joseph, and Magdalene, her family. It was a whole karmic family relationship to come back and create a positive energy person that people would respect because he came from both sides of the house of David, his mother's side and his father's side. There could be no question as to his lineage, and therefore there could be no question as to the importance of the things that he taught. And the Jewish religion had fallen way behind in respecting women, even though the Temple of Jerusalem had one section that was dedicated to the priestesses. And just like today, priests and nuns and monks take different names from Susie or Carol to a saint. When I was baptized as a baby, the priest didn't like the fact that my name was Linda, so he stuck Anne in front of it. I went through half my school life being called Anne by teachers and not even responding because I didn't know it. So my 5th grade teacher said, well, it says Anne right here in your records. I said, how could it say Anne? It says baptismal certificate. The reason it said baptismal certificate is because my mother wanted to pretend she was younger than she was, and then she wanted to pretend she was even younger than she was. So if she presented a baptismal certificate, her phony age, which was phony, couldn't be on the birth records. So I have never gone by Anne. It's not my legal name. But nuns and priests took names of aspects of souls that were respected in ancient times. And the females very often turned to the name M-A-R-E or the spelling equivalent of M-A-R-E, whether it's Mary, Marianne, Marie, Martha, Joseph of Arimathea, because that was referring to the ancient term for the ocean, which was mer. Even today in French, it's mal de mer, which means you have seasickness. That life came from the ocean, which doesn't mean we were fish. I will explain that to you. It means that life came from the mists. Life came from the fact that it was a watery planet before it was more of an earth planet. And life came from the mists, the waters. Because back in Lemuria, everybody could breathe moisture. You had lungs, and we had gill-like structures, and we could breathe air like we have today, or we could breathe underwater. So when you see M-A-R-E, that is referring to the female aspect, the divine mother that came here to the planet. So you'll find that most ancient females in the Middle East came through with Mary. By the way, as a little side note, there are more churches named after Mary and Mary Magdalene than there are Jesus. Interesting. So does that mean the female energy of God is any better than the male aspect? No, she's equal. And that's what Jesus tried to impart. That's why he was so threatening to the Sanhedrin, which was the group of priests that controlled the temples. And when he saw they were doing actual money changing inside the temple, not inside the temple walls where the rest of the commerce was taking place, but inside, so nobody could see the cut that the priests were taking, that the Jewish priests were taking, the rabbis were taking, because that would be all in undercover, behind closed doors. He was furious. Commerce area is for commerce. Spiritual areas are for spirituality. So they didn't like this. They didn't like this guy bringing back the importance of the female aspect of God, bringing back the dignity of women, telling men they had to treat people equally, telling people that the meek shall inherit the earth. It doesn't mean that people who are afraid of everything and hiding behind the door. It means the people who are not quite so wealthy. Tell that to Donald Trump. The last at the table should be brought to the first. That means just because you're sitting up there in your fabulous robes and your magnificent jewelry doesn't mean you should be closest to the vibration of goodness. Did you earn it? Maybe the lowly maid, who you consider a lowly creature in your way but serving you, is more spiritually valuable than you are. I think that's something we all need to remember, is that kindness, graciousness, my favorite word. If you just live by those two words, graciousness and kindness, and actually it's almost redundant, because if you're gracious, you are also kind. If that's all you live by is the word gracious, you're going to have a very sacred life. I'm not saying religious. I don't want religion on the planet. I want God on the planet. And when God's on the planet, then people are kinder. They're more respectful of each other, of themselves. The more respectful they are of the environment. The more respectful they are of other people's thoughts. And if other people are actually incorrect because they've been misinformed, then you can graciously re-inform them of the accuracy of the information that you have. Not beat them to death, not shoot them because they're different. Recent studies have been coming out where babies as young as 3 months old can recognize good from bad, and they tend to want, they've been doing this with puppets, and they tend to want to reward the puppet that did good things and punish the puppet that did bad things. Not just ignore it, but punish the puppet. So this is on 60 Minutes last night. They're all musing, how could this possibly be with a 3-year-old? I thought they had clean slates. No, they're people. They've come from other lifetimes. They don't have clean slates. They understand that there has to be justice. Not somebody else's rules and regulations, but basic justice. This one puppet was being mean, and they wanted that puppet punished for the meanness. They didn't say kill the puppet. They said punish the puppet. And they gravitated, 80% of the children gravitated towards the good puppet. Now you say 80%, oh, that number seems familiar. That number, because that's basically the ratio of good versus bad on the planet. And I don't mean necessarily shooting people, that's part of it, but people who are unkind to their families, people who are unkind to animals. I'd like to find that clown who buried that puppy up to his neck and then shot him twice in the head. I'd like to find that person. I'm not very generous towards cruelty. And that's the message that Jesus came here to teach people. Equality of the female energy of God, dignity of women, and being kind to each other. If that's all you remember in your life, along with the word gracious, then you have Jesus' message. And it doesn't matter what day he was born. They think it was 4 BC. They don't know. I don't care. Because I still live with Jesus' message and Mary's message of devotion and kindness and his wife's message. Magdalene was never a hooker. That was the way the Catholic Church had to try to denigrate her. Constantine, may he be resting in hell quite comfortably, continued that denigration and basically gave it his blessing. Constantine didn't convert to Christianity or Catholicism, by the way, till he was on his deathbed, and even that's debated. He was talking to a priest about it. I don't know. I don't care what religion he was. I don't like religion. I like spirituality. I like graciousness and kindness. That was the message of that family. Why 3 days for the resurrection? 3 is a number that's important. Why? Because it's the Trinity. It's the body, mind, and spirit. It's the Father, the Mother, the child. It's the physical, the astral, and the esoteric level or ethereal level of consciousness. 3 is an important transformational number. It was planned all along that he survived. No question that he suffered horribly with his physical body. He never said, God, why have you forsaken me? Because he knew the plan. It sucked, but he knew it, and he went through with it. And his family was already in order, those who were going to stay behind like his brother James, and those that would travel with him. I believe they split into 2 caravans and met up later in the areas of Marseille, France, Baum, and then Mary Magdalene stayed behind with their daughter, who was called Sophia, or the Black Madonna, and Jesus and his mother, after Mary Magdalene went into retreat in a cave in Baum. I've had clients visit there and tell me it was magical. And then Jesus and his mother went to India. There's a wonderful book called Jesus Lived in India. If you're from Europe, it's called Jesus Died in India. And there are photographs of the burial site for Mary and the burial site for Jesus. And guess where it is? When the Bible says Jesus went to paradise, guess what paradise translates into? Kashmir, which is now in parts of Pakistan. So I wish you all a very blessed, a very gracious Christmas. Everybody. This is Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking.